Welcome to Every Church, a Peace Church. This program promotes the belief that the church could turn the world towards peace if the church lived and taught as Jesus lived and taught. My name is Don Edwards, and I'm your host for today's show. And joining me today is my good friend and God's good friend, Dr. Reverend C.T. Vivian. Welcome, C.T.
Good enough.
I hope you will always come to our show and this opportunity to share your perfect spirit about peace and nonviolence in the way that Jesus would have us do. I'm wondering if you can give us a little idea, CT, if I could call you CT.
Sure, please do.
I've known you for, it seems like a long time.
That's right.
I feel like we're soul brothers.
That's exactly right.
And that's my privilege.
Yeah, that's it.
Tell me about Every Church, a Peace Church. The notion, the motto that the church could turn the world towards peace if the church lived and taught as Jesus lived and taught. What are we saying when we say this?
Well, is that, it is most interesting when you think about Every Church, a Peace Church, is how a very few people got that idea and started a movement. And because they knew it was right. I remember when they called me and they said, Vivian, I'd like for you to come to a program and all that sort of thing, and for Every Church, a Peace Church. I said, what? He said, Every Church, a Peace Church. And I thought, just as they thought, this can become a meaningful movement.
Right.
Is because how do we get the church separated from the idea of the culture so it can in fact focus on what Christ was about?
Yes.
And Christ was about peace. He was about truth and justice and love. And if you're about those things, you can have peace. If you're not, you can't. And to me, also, it was about what Martin King, the prophet of our time, had taught us for the last, for the 50 years preceding, 40 years really preceding. So when you look at that, I could not help but think this is the ideal thing. And the Quakers and the Mennonites and the Church of the Brethren, these were all denominations that long have been doing that same thing, and have been willing to go to jail for the right to have created a great separation between those who really just want to accept the culture and go along, the get-along Christians, or those that really want to believe in Jesus and change the world for right. And when we think about it, John Stoner was the person that called me, who comes out of that tradition. And had started this movement and created these symbols, and now for the past 2 years or so, we've really gone a long way in getting the idea over. And I just thank you for setting up this program so we can get over ideas like this.
Well, you know, CT, the notion that every church, a peace church, it's striking in its simplicity.
That's what.
But it's also striking in the fact that with the realization that every church is not a peace church, and we can just look at the TV sometimes in the morning and hear the ministers preaching a gospel of war or Armageddon or some type of doctrine that promotes the fact that violence is an okay means to a higher end. Now, how do we relate that to Jesus' teaching?
Well, you see, I think that we're seeing movements that are changing things. It was the Christian church that was a tremendous part, essential to winning the civil rights movement. So that the same people that are talking about war, the same people that talked about racism just a short time ago, they needed somebody to hate, somebody to put down, somebody to belittle, something to say, we are part of this culture. It was a culture of racism, it was a culture of hate, it was a culture that in fact put people down, yet they wanted to be a part of it because that was to be acceptable in America. Now, eventually, America has to come to a time when Christ is truly acceptable in it, not the symbol, not the idea only, not as some logo that the cross becomes more than a logo, right? But it becomes, in fact, what we live by. Right. War is the central issue of our time right now, and the Christian church falls tremendously short on it.
Well, how can we bring the church back to its roots, the roots that the same roots that are spoken from the Sermon on the Mount, the same roots where Jesus has asked Peter to lay down the sword, and how do we get the church to focus back on that very core message? I like to think that's the true fundamental church.
It is.
The true fundamental church is the Sermon on the Mount.
Sure.
So how do we get these fundamentalists to move from where they are now to where Christ is?
Yeah. Is that, see, the fundamental message is the message of love and truth and love, love and truth and justice, right? Is that the term gets used in quite other ways, right? But the fundamental Christianity deals with love, right? Yes. That is the central concept. I think that we have to challenge ministers, every minister in the country, to preach it, and be willing to pay the price that comes from preaching it in the face of a nation that wants to go to war. Is that here we are as a Christian nation taking, allowing our political spokespeople to speak for us in such ways that we destroy about 300 to 400 years of humanity's moving toward peace. When you come to the point that a just war policies that the church used for centuries, because men, in spite of whatever good there was in the world, just wanted to kill each other because of their greed and their desire to take whatever everybody else had, all right? In spite of the fact that we come to the time so we had just war theorists, but it would come to the time that, well, this one step by step as we have come to the point that we could get to the United Nations, all right, that is supposed to settle these things on behalf of the world.
Right.
We decided we didn't care what the United Nations thought. We didn't care about whatever came before. We were going to jump on and destroy anybody we wanted to destroy. All right, is that when we have a movement that speaks out against that, we have the chance to do it. The same as we had a movement that slowly developed and continued to develop until we had the March on Washington, the greatest demonstration at the time, that caused us to rethink American racism and what was acceptable socially now becomes a matter of horror and shame for this entire nation. We have to make war the same way. Yeah. When I saw 2 million people in Britain and across this world, I was leading a march in South Bend, Indiana at the time, right? And I was a small part of this great international mass of people moving. Yes. I said, this is our March on Washington, all right? Yes. Is that the people of the world do not want war, and they're willing to stand up and place their personalities against it, yes. Right? Yes. It says that we're at a spot where we can do that. And when our country, our nation, a Christian nation, makes such abominable mistakes, all right, it allows us then to stand up if we have not just the ideas of Jesus, but the ideas of the Christ as well. Huh? If we're willing to suffer for it, all right, is that then we can, in fact, have the kind of world now that we want. We can go from war being a normal kind of thing to war finally becoming a thing that the Christian church and Christians will not allow.
Yes. The opening of our program shows some film taking of people who have, after the Sunday services, they step outside their church and they witness for peace. And this is a type of witnessing that we need to see not only on the streets, but also in our pulpits as well as in our hearts. Now, the ties between the peace movement and the civil rights movement, you can see the closeness.
Sure.
The same tactics can work.
That's right.
The same principles are involved.
Precisely.
We're talking about love.
That's right.
We're talking about love in the face of danger.
Precisely.
This is the Christian Jesus experience.
The whole Christian history, the history of the Christian church.
How can we bring this movement, crystallize this movement of faith and peace, looking beyond Iraq? Just
That's right.
Our administration is looking beyond Iraq, and so the people, the children of God, the peacemakers, must look beyond Iraq.
That's right.
And how do we do that as a really not just a Christian community, but people who know that God's will is a will of peace and of love?
That's exactly. I'm glad you said not only a Christian message, right? Is that I think that we have to, in fact, repair the damage that we have done.
Yes.
Is that if we can really prove that we're not there for just war and oil, right? If we can actually prove that we're not there just to let the whole Arab world know that we will destroy you anytime we want to by any pretext that we desire. If we can let the world really believe that, we've got a chance. But we can't do that when we're not willing to give just a few more weeks to let the UN act. We can't do that when we act as though that the United Nations, since it's not going along with us, is not worthy of existence. We can't do that as long as our concept is one, is that we will make other people pay the bill for our desire to be on top of globalization.
We've paid and are paying a large price for this move towards violence and unilateralism, but we still have a wonderful world, and it's up to the children of God to witness for it. And we've got a witness for a wonderful world in Teresa Hightower, and she comes to join us along with Mose Davis, singing a wonderful tune about a wonderful world.
I see fields of green, skies of blue. I see them all for me and for you. And I say to myself, what a wonderful world. Yeah. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, bright blessed days and dark sacred nights. And I say to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow are pretty in the sky. The faces of the people as they go passing by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? But they're only saying, I love you. I hear babies cry, and I watch them grow, knowing they will learn much more than you or I will ever know. And I say to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow are pretty in the sky. Faces of the people as they go passing by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're only saying, I love you. I hear babies cry, and I watch them grow, knowing they will learn much more than you'll ever know. And I say to myself, what a wonderful world. Oh, I say to myself, what a wonderful world. Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Teresa and Mose. That was beautiful, wasn't it?
Oh, it was lovely.
Friends shaking hands,
Yes.
saying, how do you do?
And what they really mean
saying is, I love you.
That's a great, that's a great line. That whole thing is a wonderful song.
It is a wonderful song, and it's a song that we really need for. It's a song of all ages. It's a song that my 9-year-old loves to sing, and my 4-year-old joins in with her.
Yeah, I heard her.
I want to tell our listeners where they can obtain more information about Every Church, a Peace Church, and by directing them to our website, which will be shown on the screen. It's www.ecapc.org. www.ecapc.org. That will lead you to what we're all about. It'll lead you to scriptural texts, information, current events, all from the perspective of where Jesus would want us to look, from Jesus' perspective, the perspective of love, the perspective of nonviolence, the perspective of reaching out to all humanity, wherever and without regard to nations or states. That's the Jesus message, as I understand it. Don't you agree?
Without doubt.
He didn't look to nations and states. He didn't even look to religions.
That's true.
He just looked right to the soul of man and said that I love you.
Okay.
And he meant it, and he sacrificed his life to show that how courageous he was in that conviction.
And he proved it at every level. And because the thing is, there's that tendency, he was just an individual being good, right? Or that Christians are just individuals being good. We have to understand that he created a community of people. He created not just a church, right? But he created a movement of people who was willing to say no to even the Roman Empire, you see, and that there were hundreds of thousands of Christians that were killed for what they believed, of people who we now know as Christians, all right, who was willing to die for obeying Jesus. This is something we do not have today, because we don't even argue the issues of what does it really mean to be a Christian. This is why we have to ask the question as a statement, but every church a peace church. Why isn't every Christian church a peace church? Becomes the ultimate question for this whole movement. Why is it that Christian ministers are more concerned about going along than actually declaring that justice and peace and love are the really basis of Christianity?
Well, I think a lot of times the focus of many ministries, and I don't want to be condemning or critical too much anyway.
Yeah.
But the focus seems to be so much on personal salvation, or maybe personal prosperity. And that was, Jesus was a very prosperous man, but he was prosperous in a way that he was giving all that he had to others. And he was able to receive a lot from others.
And did.
You know, I see ministers talking about, do you believe in Jesus? Do you believe in Jesus? You know, and many times they'll do it with a, you know.
Yeah.
But I guess the question is, do you believe Jesus?
Yes.
Not do you believe what he said?
Even the devil know that he existed.
Yeah.
But doesn't want to live by what he said.
Yeah. And I think that's the crisis that people of faith, and particularly Christians, have, is because you know, Jesus laid it out fairly plain and fairly simple, and the message has gotten all confused, and we don't worship what he did, what he taught, but we worship some type of strange conglomeration of Christianity in many cases in our church.
Well, let's look. One of the major things we have to see is that when we decide on war, we start talking about what the Old Testament said. We don't come to see what Christ said in the New Testament. When we come to any of the issues of violence, we go Old Testament, as though Christ didn't bring an entirely new understanding of relationships. As he said, by this you will know that you are my disciples, that you love one another. And it's not just on an individual basis, it's for all humanity, right?
Well, I've heard a minister say that, not a minister on TV, that is quite prominent, saying that when Jesus meant love your neighbor, he was talking individually, like, you know, you are to love your neighbor, but not really. A nation is not supposed to love another people, or our policy is not to be guided by something other than love your neighbor. It just means that you and the people that you're around. Now, how did we get there from there?
Because we have always had warring groups who saw themselves as more important than who they said was their God. Right? Is that this is why we go back to the Old Testament, because we had a God of war. But by the time you get to the 8th century prophets, it is very clear that we're on our way to a higher understanding of man's relationships to man as well as to God. And God gives us Jesus Christ, as that's what our church believes, right? Gives us Jesus Christ, who tells us to love one another even as I have loved you. And he proves that love by going to the cross. Is that we get there because we choose to go with where the culture is instead of to choosing to what Christ really said.
Well, going where the culture is going to lead us in very, very difficult times, as culture has already at this point. And it concerns me, not only we're going into a cultural violence, but a culture where we are not providing any safety net, or even the social network here is falling apart.
That's it.
And because we don't show the love even for our own people in terms of where our politics are going, and so we're really not showing any love for people that are across the way. I want to thank you, CT, for being here. I love you very much. Our family loves you, and Atlanta and the world loves you.
Your whole family.
You're a wonderful spirit, a wonderful witness for really the true Jesus, which was a courageous person who stood up to evil and did it without fear and without trepidation. Even though you may have been shaking a little bit in the boots a little bit, but your heart was still and was comforted in knowing that. I want to, in talking about Martin indicated and counseled us on the evening before his death that we have difficult times ahead, and true enough, we do have a difficult time ahead. But the Lord and God has called us children of God, for those who act for peace. And it's a time for us to gather up, to organize, to activate, and to motivate ourselves to work in all ways towards peace. There's a song that Diane Reeves sings, and she says that God and time are synonymous. God will reveal all things in time. So be still, stand in love, and pay attention. Please tune in again as we continue to explore the issues of faith and peace on Every Church a Peace Church. And go to the website. Again, that's www.ecapc.org. Learn about Every Church a Peace Church. Get your church organized towards peace. Encourage your pastor to talk about the Sermon on the Mount and not Revelations. And just thank you for being with us and being a part of our experience here on WAIB. God loves you. Namaskar.
Our back on us. How